Hello, 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 and welcome to our spooky middle grade live stream with the fabulous Fleur Bradley. We are so excited to talk all about her new book, Daybreak on Raven Island. So we're going to have plenty of time for your burning questions and our burning questions. But first of all, let's see who's joining us because we have some guests joining us too. So Josh, tell us all about yourself. Tell us one secret that you've never told anybody in your life and, just introduce yourself.
Oh, wow. Hi, I'm Josh Roberts. I'm the author of The Witches of Willow Cove, which came out in 2020, and the forthcoming sequel, which is called The Curse of Willow Cove. And I am excited to be here to talk all about Fleur's new book, which I think is awesome. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Adrianna.
Hi, I'm Adrianna Cuevas. I actually shoved my books over here, so hold up. I'm the author of The Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez, Cuba in my pocket, and then my next book that comes out in April, The Ghosts of Rancho Espanto. This is not an arc. This is something I made because my publisher's only doing e-arcs. So there you go. That's how it's done these days. But I'm super excited to be here.
That's so cool. I love that. That's even better because it's a surprise when you turn it over. So that's super fun. Well, I'm Kim Ventrella, author of various books for middle grade readers. And also I am joined by Mabel. Mabel is a really amazing haunted doll, or is she haunted? It's up to you to decide, but she will be joining us as well. And so, of course, though, our main special guest, Fleur Bradley, just give us a little info. Like, who is Fleur Bradley?
Oh, it's a mystery. That's what it is. On a serious note, I am sort of the person for a mystery in middle grade. I love mysteries, and before Daybreak on Raven Island, there was Midnight at the Barclay Hotel. And that's a mystery that's kind of modeled after Agatha Christie mysteries, really that sort of three suspects and a hotel kind of setting. And then for Daybreak on Raven Island, I kind of took it to, okay, so what would a reader of Midnight at the Barclay Hotel want to read next? What's the next step? And for Daybreak on Raven Island, I modeled it after Alcatraz, made it nice and spooky, and made it Raven Island, which is full of ravens, as you can probably tell from the title. There are these three kids that go on a field trip, and they take the ferry to Raven Island. It's got an abandoned prison, a lighthouse. They do the tour, and then they miss the ferry off the island, and there are currents, and you can't go anymore once the ferry has left. So they have to spend the night on Raven Island. And there's all the ghosts of Raven Island, all the old mysteries surrounding this prison break, and then a new mystery surrounding a murder. So kind of Alfred Hitchcock for kids is what I like to call it, just to make it quick. And so that's me in a nutshell. I have ravens, as you can tell. So
I love that. I used to have this amazing talking raven. Like when you squeeze it would go like, caw, caw. And I have no idea what happened to it. I'm so sad.
Oh, I need one of those. I'm starting to see ravens everywhere. Everywhere I go, I'm like, oh, it's over there. And they're such cool birds. And that's the one thing that was fun to research. Yeah, it was really super fun. So
yeah, I love that. So I love the aspect of the ravens. And you start this book, you're actually kind of looking at things from the raven's perspective, right? So what inspired you to do that opening?
I love anything with animals in it. I'm a bit of an animal nut, and just I love the whole scary vibe around ravens. So when I started researching that, I realized that they're really clever birds. They talk to each other in a way. They can sound sometimes like human voices. They actually know how to mimic the sound of humans. So I thought that was so cool. And I thought, what a cool way to open, to have sort of the prison, the bell tower, and the raven named Poe sitting there going, oh, this is not going to be any good. There should be no humans here. Why are the humans coming? And ravens also as a protector of the dead in a way, of the ghosts. They're protecting the ghosts of Raven Island. And that kind of goes back to some of the lore that we know from ravens. So yes, that was fun to start with, and that kind of set the mood. And we were talking before we started about writing fast, and this was a book that just kind of wrote really fast, because once I started with that, everything just sort of kind of fell into place. And a lot of fun to write from an animal's perspective. For my next book, I'm hoping to do the same, because I just think it's really fun.
Oh, I love it. We'll have to guess what kind of animal now, which is super fun. But I know we all have so many burning questions. I have 100 burning questions approximately. But reminder, if you're out there listening, you can leave us a comment and we will get comment or question. We will answer all kinds of burning questions about Daybreak on Raven Island, or Fleur's writing process, or of course our darkest secrets. You can ask about those too. But you mentioned Alfred Hitchcock, and I noticed there's a lot of cool references to different horror movies and things like that in the book, because we have Marvin, who is the character who's trying to shoot his own horror movie. So he's kind of like a movie buff and things like that. So, I mean, that was fun. Did you have a lot of fun kind of working in those references? And are you hoping that kids will kind of go and then Google this stuff and be like, oh, wait, what is this?
What is that? Yeah, you know what? What's funny is that I'm not really a scary movie sort of person, or at least I don't consider myself one. But then when I was starting to think about my kind of my inspiration, or the things I grew up watching, or the things that influenced me, I was thinking of the Twilight Zone and Tales from the Crypt. And some of those things, I'm like, oh, Twilight Zone, I really like the remake that they did. And just using that a bit, where I'm thinking, okay, I grew up with the old Twilight Zone, so to speak. And to kind of think of, okay, what would a kid think, like Marvin, who's young, who's maybe seen the Twilight Zone, or maybe seen some of the older episodes. Like my kids watched some of the old stuff and still liked it. So it's those influences that were really fun to kind of weave in, and that blend of mystery and horror in a way that Alfred Hitchcock kind of has down. It was fun to make it nice and scary, and to use some of those things in the book.
I love that.
Hard to, sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. I was going to say, I'm such a big Twilight Zone fan, so I'm right with you there.
I was going to ask though, Fleur, was it hard to pick references? I always have trouble, because we're the age group that we're writing for. Sometimes some of the things that we think of to reference, kids are not exactly aware of. I had a laugh last week because I had someone considerably younger than me refer to a movie they had seen, Notting Hill, that came out in 1999, and they called it a classic movie, and I almost died.
I know. It's like when you start to hear your heavy metal influences in the grocery store.
There it is. Was it? Did you have a moment where you thought, can I incorporate Alfred Hitchcock? Are kids aware of this? Was it more of a challenge for you, I guess, to do that?
I use, which I've seen other people do, so it's a bit sneaky, but I use the parents. Whereas if you have a movie buff parent, or if you have a movie buff like Marvin, the character in the book, they'll maybe be just a little bit more inquisitive, and they can explain who Alfred Hitchcock is, and Noah as well. One of the other characters in the book has watched some movies with his dad. So there's some of those things that you can kind of use to introduce it, and then have the character explain it, rather than me go, let me tell you kids about Alfred Hitchcock, because that's not fun. So, and there should be nuggets in there, because you're right, it does need to be framed in the world that kids live in today. I don't want it to feel like, some sort of 1980s, let's talk about all the things that were awesome in the 80s, because there were also a lot of things that were really not at all awesome in the 80s. So I didn't want it to be that, although, that has its own place, if you were doing something that's set in that time. But yes, it's definitely a challenge to bring that into the framework of kids today, and explain it without being, too lectury, or I don't know what the word is, but yeah.
So speaking of Hitchcock, I loved how you described the Barclay Hotel as sort of the Agatha Christie one, and this being the Hitchcock story, because it does, to me, as I read it, it felt like it was sort of the next level, the next step in progression from mystery. It's a little bit scarier, a bit more like, I think, written maybe for a slightly older audience, sort of the top end of middle grade. And I wondered, like, I assume that was a conscious decision to move on and not just write something different, but write at a different, for a different level within middle grade.
It was in a way, and it wasn't in another way. I don't always set it out to be that way, but I was sort of thinking, okay, what's the kid who puts down the Barclay Hotel going to want to read next? And some of it is just sort of fell into place because of the topic that I chose, because of the scary element of being stuck on an island overnight. That's a bit different than tagging along with the adults in your life and being stuck in a hotel for the night. Mm-hmm. So the feeling of it obviously was different. And I decided to really lean into the whole scary stuff, even though that's not naturally something where I'm coming from. I'm more of a mystery writer, I think, but I'm slowly sort of coming to the horror side. And having fun with it, because it is really fun to build up that scary feeling and to go sort of deeper into all of that, and definitely have that sort of Hitchcock feeling where there's a lot of build and a lot of it's not necessarily the scary thing itself, it's the build to it. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love the ghosts in there. You have these characters. I know a couple of the characters as they're like getting the tour and they're hearing some of the stories. They're going around the prison, and the really creepy tour guide is just right away. He's like, watch out, like what's gonna, things might happen, and like there might be these ghosts here. But the kids are like, oh no, like they're about facts. Like they don't really believe in ghosts. But then you have like Noah, who has lost his mother. And then so he has that thought, like he doesn't believe in ghosts, but also he still talks to his mom every night, even though she's gone. So he has this kind of conflicting viewpoint. So I like how you bring that in the beginning. Does that kind of line up like with your thoughts on ghosts? Like, are you kind of skeptical going in? Or like what is your perspective on that whole ghost thing?
I've not seen a ghost that I know of. Now I've sort of had some moments just like everybody else, like you hear something or you're somewhere, you've heard the story, or in our house, for instance, we hear voices sometimes where it's like, where's this coming from? So there's that. But overall, I mean, I went to the Stanley Hotel, did the ghost tour, and there were no ghosts, but a bunch of antiques and stories and stuff. But yeah, I honestly don't know. But I've also watched my share of ghost hunting shows and stuff with kids and my husband. And watching that, sometimes there's evidence where I'm like, yeah, I don't know, I can't explain this away. So I'm sort of a skeptic, but if you put me on Raven Island for the night like that, I probably would believe in ghosts at the end of it. So it was kind of fun. I think the fun part about writing ghost stories is that you can create this whole story behind it, like for whatever the story, the ghost, what their backstory is. You can really get carried away and build this whole world essentially around, for instance, Raven Island and the prison and the prisoners there. And I could take stuff from Alcatraz and the stories from the prisoners there and kind of take that as my inspiration and sort of run with it for Raven Island and make it the whole backstory. So yes, I am being dragged into the horror side.
I know. Thanks, Samantha. That's so we're trying, of course. But
I feel like dragging is the perfect verb for like
yes. But you gotta admit, Fleur, you said that so casually of, I hear voices in my head. You just dropped that in there. So I think
There could be ghosts, or there's a person in my house. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the really scary thing. Is there a person?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I
It's fun. It's fun to go because you can let your imagination truly go, I think, on the horror side, which is really fun. Yeah.
So I was kind of wondering, seeing, Midnight at the Barclay Hotel and now Raven Island, to me, they're such strong, like, setting focused stories that I'm wondering, when you're planning your stories, is that what you think of first?
For Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, I didn't. I wanted to write a mystery that was like Agatha Christie, and I struggled for a while to make it work. So I kind of walked around with it. I had different settings in mind, and it wasn't until I visited the Stanley that I was like, yes, this is it. And that's where the haunted aspect came from, which I had not intended to write. Now, for Daybreak on Raven Island, it was instant, where the next book, it was time to start thinking about the next book. What was I going to write? And I'm like, oh, let's do something scary. Oh, Alcatraz. And then everything just kind of fell into place. So it did, for Daybreak on Raven Island, it definitely started with that Alcatraz inspiration and what could I do with it? And then some of it, and I didn't really realize it until afterward, some of it came a bit from COVID, because this was a book I wrote when, COVID lockdown was going on. And a lot of the running theme throughout it is just isolation and loneliness. And I didn't really realize that that's what I was writing about until I was looking back. I'm like, oh yeah, everybody's lonely in this book. So, that was an interesting realization. And also to sort of weave that throughout the book and the prisoners and the angle of kind of what it's like to be in prison and how horrible it can be, and some of the darker aspects of incarceration. So it got a little bit deeper than I had originally. Originally it was Alcatraz, this is cool, and then it becomes all this other stuff. So that was kind of an added element that I was able to kind of flesh out in edits and whatnot. So it's definitely, but setting is where it begins for me all the time.
Okay.
So one thing I noticed both in Barclay Hotel and in Raven Island is you have this great dynamic between your characters. There's always just it's such a nice element of it, and I'm wondering, like, in this case, so you talked about setting being the first thing, but story-wise, which came first, the characters or the premise, once you're on the island, and then how did they evolve together?
Great question, because it starts with setting, of course, to set the mood, but it's the characters that obviously take the story and that make it an interesting read for kids. What I tried to do, and this was in a similar format as the Barclay Hotel, where there are 3 kid characters, I tried to make each of the kids different and somehow make it so they wouldn't be the kids who would sit at the same table in the cafeteria, because I think that's an interesting way to look at friendships and relationship dynamics and just the way we all exist, kind of where you have your group of people, and sometimes you wonder, oh, what if I just had a little longer conversation with this person, maybe we would have been friends. And for these kids in particular, they all carry around a secret, but in a different way than in the Barclay Hotel, where it's something that makes them lonely. And what I wanted to do with the book really was take each of these kids with their secrets and go, okay, you know what, if you talk about those things to someone else who might feel the same way, that loneliness goes away and you can help each other, and you can, work, in this case, work together to solve a murder mystery. But in general life, it's great if you have something that you're struggling with. It might be a good idea to talk about it. So that's how I started with this book. And it just sort of, I flesh out the characters in that way, where I'm trying to think of, okay, what would be an interesting, different character dynamic that would obviously cause some form of conflict, but maybe kids that look at things differently or come from different backgrounds. And I try to kind of run with that and flesh that out. And that's, I think, is the fun part. The hard part also as an author, because the scary stories, the setting and stuff, that's kind of the sort of fun stuff you get to play with. And the characters are the hard work, where the real story is what you do with them.
Yeah, and you were talking about looking at prison and that experience of what it's like to be a prisoner. And then you have Tori, whose brother is in prison, like in a modern prison. And so she's thinking, like, as she's going through this old, like, dilapidated, haunted, like, ruin of a prison, thinking about the experience that her brother is going through. So that was an interesting aspect that you brought in too, that I feel like, there are kids who can relate to that, and it'll be interesting to read about Tori's experience.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that I did a ton of research for, and a lot of it didn't make it into the book, just mostly because it didn't really fit. But when I looked at some of the statistics and some of the things that are happening today, it's 1 in 28 kids that have an incarcerated parent, which is, we have an incarceration problem in the United States, obviously affects people of color in a way that it is just, will break your heart. And that I wanted to touch on that a little bit, but at the same time, it wasn't the kind of book where I could really flesh that out for a 10-year-old reader. You have to make it relatable. And that for me was the most relatable thing, where I was thinking, well, that's one kid in every classroom, and they're probably keeping that a secret because you don't want to share it. I remember my daughter had a friend in school, and we went to a birthday party, and everyone was a little bit hush-hush and talking about dad was on a business trip. But we figured out, sort of between the lines, that was not the case, and dad was incarcerated. So it's something that, and I can only imagine what that feels like as a kid, to not feel like you can talk about that, or even if it's something that, people get incarcerated even when they're, they may be innocent, and they can spend a really long time locked up. If you don't have bail money, if you don't, I could go on for forever and a day about this, but it is atrocious. It's atrocious. So, I wanted to talk about that a little bit in the context of Tori, to kind of say, hey, you know what? It's okay if this is you to talk about this stuff, because it happens to people, and it's okay to share those kinds of things, or to share that maybe, like Noah, that you're nervous, and that, you miss your mom, and that you're new in class, and all that. So hopefully, very heavy topic, but hopefully, through the book, what really translates is that feeling of, it's okay to talk about things that are hard for you, because someone else is probably struggling with something that is hard for them. And by talking, it gets better.
Well, and I love that, Fleur, because I think you've touched on what is so great about horror and mystery and basically genre fiction. When I was a kid, I would not have picked up a book that was primarily about, a kid that has an incarcerated parent, or, a kid whose parent just passed away. I didn't like those heavy, I still don't honestly like those heavy kind of books, but I'm always amazed. And I love seeing how authors like you, and like what you did with this book, can weave in those themes where it's not the central part of the book, but it's still, addressed in a way that young kids can process it and understand it. So I think that's fantastic that you did that, because I honestly don't know that we have a lot of middle grade out there that deals with kids with incarcerated family members. And like with the statistic that you gave, it's obviously a big chunk of our readers.
Yeah. I think it's the only one I pulled up really that was relevant was From the Dusk of Zoe Washington, and that was it. So because it's a difficult subject to cover in the context of middle grade, I think that was the most challenging for me. Is my editor was sort of like, maybe you can touch on that, because we're talking about Alcatraz. And I sort of spent a lot of time going, how do I, because I was doing school visits with second graders, and I'm thinking to myself, how am I working this in? Yeah. But the Daybreak on Raven Island, the kids are just a little older. So I'm like, okay, I think I can push the envelope just a little bit And you're right. It's because it isn't an issue book out, out the gate, because it is woven in, it works. And I would agree is that, I mean, all of us don't pick up books that we read for fun, all these really, really heavy things, right? We pick genre, we pick mysteries, we pick horror, we pick, romance, because that's an enjoyable read. So, why do we expect kids to do something different? I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think that like, another reason that kids pick up books is covers, and the cover to Daybreak Raven Island is incredible. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about the process. Yeah, look at that. I mean, it's just such a gorgeous cover. And as think of myself as a middle grade reader when I was younger, like that, I probably would not have picked up an issue book, but I certainly would have been drawn to this cover, and would have, I think the great thing about genre fiction, as Adrianna was saying, is it can be thought-provoking, but you don't necessarily know when you're going in what it is you're going to be learning or thinking about.
Exactly. Yeah.
What was the process of working with your publisher on the cover, and how many different versions did you get to see, and did you have final approval or anything?
I'm trying to remember. I saw the original sketch, which already looked cool. I sent some imagery and sort of mood stuff when in the very initial stages, just so the illustrator would have something to work with as far as Alcatraz is easy sort of to Google, and you can see the image of Alcatraz, and there you go. It's the colors that I think work really well, which are not colors I would have chosen out the gate, but I think it really works between that and the black to create the mood. I think the only thing that we sort of went back and forth on a little bit was the shape of the characters. Originally, they were all kind of thin, and in the book itself, we have a taller girl who is more muscular and solid because she plays soccer. So she's a soccer goalie, so she can't be a tiny person. And then Marvin is just described as, he's shorter and he's a little bit, he's not thin. So I didn't want all the characters to be super thin, because I didn't think that was a good. It looked aesthetically cool, but it was not really the right look for because it's so important for the characters, I think, to be represented right. So we changed that a little bit, but that was mostly the publisher. They do all the coordination with the illustrator, and the illustrator just did an amazing job. So that was really kind of cool, and definitely it sends a different message. Like Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, you can tell it looks a little bit younger, and Daybreak on Raven Island is definitely kind of like, ooh, something scary, which is good. So
yes, we love something scary. That's one of our favorite things, of course. So you've taken us we've gone to some classic locations, right? We have like the haunted hotel, and now we have like the haunted prison, which is a little bit, like you said, it's a little grittier, right? A little edgier. So where can you tell us like where you're thinking about taking us next? Like,
I'm working on a middle grade right now, and it has a cemetery in it, and that's as much as I can say for now, because it's definitely one of those that I'm still kind of holding like this, because when I'm still drafting and working on the book. Granted, I'm editing kind of now, but with my agent, but it's like it's in the writer's studio is how I like to think of it, because I'm still trying to work out exactly what the story is, and this is definitely one of those that's giving me a bit of a run for my money as far as making it all work, but it's definitely scary. So I'll keep it at that.
Okay, that's amazing. I'm super excited about it. And I know, this one's for Mabel, but are you all familiar with the Island of the Dolls? Have you seen stories about it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the Island of the Dolls, it's in Mexico, I believe. And so this island, there is a man, and so the story goes that supposedly he found this little girl's body like floating in the water, and she had died. So to honor her, he decided, and I think he found a doll, maybe like nearby, or like right after that. And so he decided to honor her. he was going to collect like all the dolls that he could find and just like put them all over this little island. So everywhere you go, there are just doll heads and old
It is
dolls. Like,
really
from the
creepy.
trees.
Yeah, that's a totally normal thing to do. Definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks for that nightmare, Kim. Super appreciate it. Well done.
You are welcome. Well, I'm just trying to see if anyone needs any inspiration. So, Fleur, if I know you're going down the spooky road now, so if you want to go like all the way down the spooky road, the Island of the Dolls can be your next destination.
I'll keep that in mind. I've seen it. There was some sort of documentary on Discovery Channel or whatever where they had some people go there for their ghost hunting adventures. And yeah, it was definitely scary. And I poke a little fun at those people for what it's worth in the book, because the ghost hunting shows, some of them I'm like, come on.
I know. Oh my gosh.
They're just so hokey, but anyway.
My son was making me watch one of those just last week, and I was like, they're so making this up. This is ridiculous.
Or are they?
Yeah.
They are. They are. My favorite one, there was this one, it's like BuzzFeed Unsolved, and it had one person who was a believer and one person who is a skeptic. And so you get both sides, and so you get to like
That's
pick
what he
your
was
team.
making me watch.
Okay. And they have one on Island of the Dolls. So go out and like look that one up. But it's fun. I like that one because then whenever they bring out the ghost box or whatever, and they're listening to stuff, they have the skeptic chime in and be like, no, that was nothing. I'm like, yes, thank you. So you get like both sides reflected.
I had a ghost hunting business when I was sometime in elementary school.
Yes.
My friend and I did it, and it was based out of my house, which was also a funeral home. So it was great marketing. And but we would go to other friends' houses and solve their hauntings.
Oh, you should make that a book.
Why haven't you written that book yet, Josh? Come on.
Because it takes me about 10 years to write a book. So. It's in the queue.
Okay. It's in the queue. Well, I feel like we have some fast writers here, and then we have some less fast writers here too.
Deliberate. We like the term deliberate.
I will say, Josh, you are famous in all my school visits because kids, always ask you about your process and what it's like. So I always explain mine. I'm like, well, it takes me like 3 months to write a first draft. And then I'm always like, but I have a friend just to give them the other end of the spectrum.
As long as you name drop the book, that's fine.
I do.
That is awesome, right? And I know now we're picking on Josh. This is like the Josh Roberts moment right now. But I remember you saying like your first draft of With the Witches of Willow Cove was like, how long was that being your first draft?
It was just a hair under 150,000 words. So
I can't. Wow, that is amazing. And so the amount of work that you put yourself through, but everybody's process is different, right?
Yeah.
So wow.
And I thought I had learned, not to center myself here too much, I thought I had learned my lesson, but the second book is turning out to be the same sort of ordeal where.
Oh no. But then you have stuff cut. I always find it easier to cut than I find to add sometimes. So it's okay. I guess you trim it back. Or maybe it's just one of those, sort of books that you can turn into 3 books. Or it's like that, like a series. Yeah. Maybe.
So, Fleur, are you an overwriter? Like, do you, in your first drafts, is it more than you need and then you have to cut? Because I'm a chronic underwriter. I always have to add like half a book.
Me too. I'm like, the first draft is done, and people are like, this is awesome. And I'm like, yeah, it's 30,000 words. And that's if I'm being good. But yes, I'm an underwriter, partly because I came from short story writing, so I'm very lean. I'm like, get in, get out, and get on my way. It's the fleshing out of the characters, the fleshing out of the setting, describing of the setting, that sort of stuff, or adding scenes that maybe sort of lift up a certain theme or an event or something where I move a little too fast, or I didn't take enough time to explain something. Then that's what I flesh out. Yes, I'm definitely an underwriter. and then I kind of add. So the bones are there, and then I have something to work with. Is sort of how I look at it. But the longer I do it, the more I outline. I will say that. So then I'm a little bit closer to the word count that I really should be. So
do you have a sense of where your stories are going? And so before you started writing Daybreak, did you have a general outline of what would happen and how you'd get there, or was there a discovery along the way?
I sort of have a mix where I had an idea of where I wanted it to go. I made a map of Raven Island, and the map that's in the book is very similar to what it is. Yeah, so I start with those kind of settings or things that it's almost like a movie. And Daybreak on Raven Island is definitely also structured very much like a script. So each section of the book goes to a certain setting and has kind of the same feel as a sequence in a movie. So it's a lot like I definitely have a good idea of where it's going. I will say though, just because I know where I'm going doesn't mean that the book goes there. So there's a lot of moments where I end up having to go back and fix and redirect. It's kind of like a wobbly shopping cart where you're trying to get it to go straight and it just seems to want to pull one way or another. So then I have to rein the story in.
Oh, I love that comparison. That's great.
Yeah, I love that. What I think in our last conversation, our author compared writing to being on the deck of the Titanic, which I thought was a great one too. And I love the wobbly shopping cart as well. That's another great one. We might have lost Adrianna to spooky thunderstorms. So man. But hopefully she'll pop back on.
We have some here as well, so I'm crossing my fingers. I keep the internet.
I know, fingers crossed. And we are kind of winding down. So if there is anyone out there that wants to ask their like burning questions, make sure to get those in the chat. But I definitely want to ask a burning question to everyone here. So this is a tough one. Okay, so if you were able to have one of your characters from Daybreak on Raven Island meet and have an adventure with a character from any other middle grade book, who would that character be? It's a tough one. I know. I saw that one. Someone asked that on Twitter the other day, and I was like, I can't answer that. That's too hard. So I was like, let me throw that.
TV shows where they bring the characters together of two different shows. It's like that, where it feels really strange when they're interacting. Oh man, that is tough. Yeah, I don't know. Josh, do you have anything?
I would have. Yes. So I would have. In my book, there's this one character who's a teenage witch who has like zero tolerance for anything remotely that she considers nerdy. Her name is Olivia. And I think she would be paired greatly with Marvin, and talking about like movie making and everything. She would just have no tolerance for that, and there would just be a lot of back and forth, which I love banter. So
that would be really fun. It's fun to write that dialogue. At least for me, it is between characters that are different or that don't see things the same way. Really fun, man. How about you, Kim? You got anything? I'm like pulling a complete blank.
Oh man, that's such a tough question because and you were saying something earlier, like off screen, which is that like we've written these books, and it's been a couple years now, probably since we have written the book. And so sometimes it's like readers know the books more than we do because they've just experienced it, right? And so for us, it's like we have to go back in our head and be like, okay, wait a minute, who, what now? But yeah, I mean, I feel like Marvin comes to mind too. Like I feel like he'd be like a really fun person to hang out with.
Yeah.
But he's someone who has like this big plan for this amazing thing that's going to happen, and kind of just like runs off and is like, okay, oh, we saw like a creepy dude like up in the woods, like going to like
follow him.
Let's follow him. So I have a character, June, from my book Hello Future Me, and I feel like she's you know, when she wants to do something, she's kind of like that too. And she's like, okay, let's just go do it. And I have this amazing plan and we're going to make it happen. So maybe I'd pair those two up and just see what kind of shenanigans they get into.
Say, that would be some trouble. That would be fun.
Yeah.
That would be so much fun. Yeah, I can't think of anything right now off the top of my head, but I think it's because I've been talking about this book for so long and I'm in the Raven Island zone. So yeah, no, it's sometimes the character just comes off the page like that. And they're so alive, and it's really fun to sort of think of what they would do. I had that with my Double Vision trilogy, the first 3 books I wrote. There's a character in there called Link Baker, and he gets into trouble all the time. And he was so much fun to write. It was first person, so he was constantly getting into trouble, and it was just so fun to see that together, kind of.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love, so that's so interesting. I know, Josh, we have writing a sequel right now. And Fleur, you have these 2 standalones, and then you had a trilogy that came before that. So what was that like process? Like, how are they different? And do you have a preference for doing something that has sequels or for doing the standalone?
I think sequels are really, really fun because it's hard to let go of those characters. I have a hard time still letting go of the Barclay Hotel characters. And like Daybreak on Raven Island too. I'm like, man, I want those kids to go on another. Now that they're friends, let's send them off on an adventure, because that's what you have with the trilogy, is that, you know, some of these characters know each other now. So there's banter like Josh was talking about that's just fun back and forth. And they're kind of like comfortable to get to know. And I know the kids like it, readers like series. So I hope to write another series someday. But I will say it is fun to just completely have a blank slate and kind of see where you want to take it with each book. It's hard work, but it's also fun because you can make it whatever you want.
I have to say, I thought writing a sequel would be a piece of cake, but it is not. It's and I also like I curse myself because I'm like, why did I include this one random detail about this character in the first book? Because it totally like gets in the way of something I want to do now. Did I really need to mention that?
Yeah, and you have to remember everything, like all those little things about a character, because your reader will binge read them 3 in a row. Right. So you need to be sharp. Yeah,
it is fun though, like you said. So like, you know, the kids are friends at the end, and then you're like, well, all right, so now that's a totally new dynamic. So it feels fresh. It's a new book, and then you have to ask yourself, well, where am I going to leave them at the end of this next book? And then, you know, what has changed? What has stayed the same? And that, I think, is one of the fun things of writing series, writing sequels.
Yeah, you can be a little more subtle with the changes that you make to your characters rather than these really big arcs too. So.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, so, okay, as someone who kind of cringes at the idea of going back and reading my old books, just because I'm like, I know I'm going to find a million ways I would rewrite it, because that's just how my brain works. So, I mean, did you literally go back and reread them? And did you have to make like a story Bible or anything like that, so that you would just have all of that laid out, so you didn't have to, you know, every time, like, when the second book and then when the third book came out, you had to go reread them again? Like, did you make any sort of like reference for that?
I did. And then my publisher did something at some point that they sent to me, and it's been a little while, but they did, and which was nice because, you know, trying to remember all the names of really minor characters, a teacher or somebody that they mention in passing that maybe becomes a bigger player somewhere along the way, where you're like, I don't remember. But and character, like Josh is saying, it's characteristics or something that is a detail that you want to make sure that you don't write something in the following book that is completely out of character for that person for whatever reason. Maybe they can't swim or whatever. Take your pick. But I did have notes, but I will say that because this was a trilogy, it was a book a year. So it was like bam, 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 as far as writing. So you still remember most of what was there. I know I see you like going, oh, it was hard. I will not lie. That's hard. The book a year stuff is a bit, you better be on your game.
Yeah. I think I probably read my book so often at the beginning as I was drafting that I completely loathed it for long periods of time. I've come back around the other way. Now I'm kind of happy, and I'm like, oh, I was so nice and gentle to those characters in the first book. I can't believe the things I'm doing to them now. Like, but my publisher also put together this incredible like Bible for me, where it would every character, whenever I described like a person's hair color or glasses or whatever, like all that detail was thrown into the document for me. Just so I don't have to, thankfully, don't have to reread again and again now. I can just kind of refer back, like, oh yeah, she had shoulder length hair. Well, it's grown a little now, or so.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it's both are fun. I think standalones and series. So definitely fun, having fun now writing another standalone. So
yeah, I actually thought, when I saw the title structure of your book, I thought Daybreak on Raven Island was a sequel until we talked about it and you told us what it was, because it makes sense, midnight to daybreak.
Well, and a lot of people want, because the Berkeley Hotel has done so well, a lot of people go, oh, it must be a series. Like, no, it was intended to be standalone, and it's probably going to remain a standalone the way that things stand now. But I did, because it was the second book was with the same publisher, it was kind of like a little nod to the first book. So that's really it, I think, as far as any connection goes. So yeah.
That's so cool, though. I hadn't even made that connection until you just said it, which is so funny. But yes, you're so right. Midnight and daybreak. Well, if people who are watching have not picked up either Midnight at the Berkeley Hotel or Daybreak on Raven Island, there are some links below where you can get signed copies of this brand new book baby. So follow those. We're super excited about this one. And if anybody is interested in having an amazing panel, kind of like this one, of super cool spooky authors come and talk to your students in grades 3 through 8, go hit us up at spookymiddlegrade.com, because we love to do our free 30-minute Q&As for students in those grades. And a huge thank you to Fleur Bradley and Adrianna Cuevas, who had the storm, and Josh Roberts for joining us tonight. It's just always super fun chatting with everyone.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah.
This was great.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I do want to say that we have coming up an amazing chat with Erin Petty, who has a new book coming out, Thelma B. in Toil and Trouble. So I'll leave us on a little teaser for that one. And thanks again to everyone who joined us tonight. Have a great evening, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks so much.